You're listening to a DM podcast.
We would like to acknowledge and give thanks to the traditional owners of the land we record this podcast on, the Yagara and Turrbal people,
and their continued connection to the land and waterways on which we meet. Hello and welcome to Sportish. I'm Libby Trickett.
And I am Georgie Trickett. We get lots of interesting messages in our DMs from time to time, but we've been sent something, and this sport wasn't really in my sights, I guess, because I don't have a child who's playing it. I hadn't really thought about it, but I had been baffled by some aspects of it, and now I understand why. So,
what, the ripping of togs underneath the water, Georgie?
I mean, it's very physical, the sport of water polo. That is the sport we're talking about. No, what I had been fascinated by was the logistics aspect of it, because I'd had friends whose girls were playing it, and they, on a Saturday morning, would be at one pool at one school in Brisbane, and then they would have to literally drive across town with a 20-minute margin to then play a second game. And I was sitting there thinking, maybe this is a pool availability issue, maybe this is how the competition's scheduled, but I think it's got something to do with how the comp's running. Let me tell you this DM. So at our school, you can try for 2 A teams in water polo. If you're under 12, you can also trial for under 13, and if you're really good, you get into both A teams. Or you can get into the under 12 A's and then be in the A, B and C for the under 13s. I just think this is a bit interesting because it's done so more teams win, but the girls that sit in the B's and C's never get the opportunity to go to the A's, perhaps as they would at another school. I can't really see any benefit of this approach. I believe other schools do this too. Would love to get your thoughts. And Lib, when we got that in the inbox, I was like, this is fascinating. Who do we talk to? And I did make some calls, and I spoke to some of our mates who are sports administrators in the general sports area. And they were like, yeah, it's something that is happening and that we're seeing, is that we have this issue where kids are playing in the 12 A's, for example, but then the same kids are also playing in the 13 A's. And again, you see that as you go up the ladder. And this is why families are driving across town, because they're playing in 2 different age groups for the same sport.
I just think that it's so toxic.
Tell us what you really think, Libby.
To call a spade, I just think it's so toxic. I mean, obviously it's unfair to the kids who aren't getting the opportunity in their own age group. But also I think it's setting an expectation for the kids who maybe are playing across grades. That's just normal. And I don't know. I think it sets quite a toxic precedent, honestly. And I don't think it benefits anybody on any level. I mean, maybe the kids who are getting to play more because they get more chance to develop their skills, but I don't actually think that is going to be of long-term benefit at all.
It's interesting you say that. We did then have a bit of a chat about who we know in water polo who would be best placed to talk about this and to provide the balance that we can't provide because we're not in the sport and we don't understand it. And Lib, we just thought, let's go straight to the top. Let's not muck around here.
Straight to the top.
So,
can I just quickly say, I wasn't able to be part of this interview, which I'm devastated about because bloody Energex and a bloody power outage and all of our...
a storm in Brisbane.
All of our plans got thwarted.
And it's not easy when we're trying to negotiate with babies as well.
Babies and storms and power outages. But anyway, Georgie did an amazing job with Bec.
Well, she was an amazing person to talk to. Let me tell you a bit about Bec Rippon. Bec Rippon is a former Australian water polo player and dual Olympian, having won bronze with the Australian women's national water polo team at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. So, she's like Olympic level.
She goes all right.
Following her stellar playing career, Bec made history when she became the first female Olympic head coach of the Aussie Stingers, which is the Aussie women's water polo team, and they took out silver in the Paris 2024 Olympics. So, Lib, I feel like when we're speaking to people with authority on water polo, we're not mucking around here.
She is the authority on water polo. I don't think there gets much better.
No, the things that you've raised, Lib, she absolutely talks to in this next little interview. We also talk about Paris because how could we not? It was such an incredible part of the Australian Olympic team's campaign in Paris and such a beautiful thing to watch back here in Australia at the wee hours of the morning. So stick around and have a listen to water polo. How should we describe it?
Royalty?
Water polo royalty, Bec Rippon. Bec, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Sportish.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Bec, I know you're not Brisbane-based and that you don't necessarily have the same issues happening in different states around the country, but I'm really interested to understand what you're seeing in terms of this idea that kids are playing in not just one team, but multiple teams over the weekend and multiple age groups, and what the impact of that is on our kids and on the system as a whole.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because I think it probably looks different all around the country. And I'd say it's likely not just water polo, but many sports where kids are playing in multiple teams. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with playing in more than one team. I think that part for me is really important. But I just think with the number of teams and kids being pushed and pulled in lots of directions, it can have an impact on their development, on, I think, their time in the sport. And I think even on the competitions themselves, there's probably a range of different things that we're seeing. Sometimes it's the same players playing with the same team for many, many years and not getting exposed to, even across multiple competitions, and not getting exposed to playing with other teammates or to other coaches. Or you have the opposite where, some players are playing with different players for every team and then it's really hard to build connections. So they're just a couple of the things that I'm seeing. I think probably where I see it from is more just like that the ability for these kids to have a really structured program, which is fun. Obviously at kids sport, it really is about fun and inclusion and safety. I think they're the prime things for me that should be in our youngest athletes coming through, or kids, they're not even athletes at that age, right? To make sure that those things are there. But I see even in that, you still want them to develop and to improve. And when they're playing in so many different teams, who's in charge, who's actually leading the development of the athletes. So I just think it's a pretty complex one with maybe no black and white, right or wrong, but there's just lots of things that present when kids are being pushed and pulled in many directions.
You make a really good point, like nobody's overseeing the overall child development or the kids' development in the sport. What do you think the role of parents is in that sort of space?
Yeah, obviously the parents are the ones doing the driving around and essentially looking out for their kids and looking for them to find what's best for them. So I think there's an element that it partly belongs to them. However, I think as a parent, you don't maybe always know what you're looking for, or you don't always know what is best for the kids in from a sporting context as opposed to maybe as a child or your kid, your own son or daughter. So I think there's a bit of a responsibility with the school or the club. And I think this is where it gets tricky. So if one child is at a school and then they play at a club on the weekend, who's taking the leadership there? And maybe it's a joint kind of acknowledgement, but it just requires people to work together. So I think sometimes if it's all happening in a club environment, then it should be the club's responsibility. If it's with the parents, if it's a school and a club, how do we get those parties to work together? I think it's actually acknowledging, this is what I see, that probably no one at junior level is able to just take full control of all of it. And maybe that's not the best thing either, but how can we work together to just ensure that the kids are getting the best experience? And sometimes that is lots of games, but sometimes it's good training. There's a whole heap of different things. It just requires people to talk a bit more. And I know that's asking a lot because there's a lot of volunteers out there that are giving their time and energy and absolutely just doing their best. But if we could have conversations, if we could have people working together or organisations working closely together to set up things that are best for the kids or the athletes coming through, then I think that's where we can really make a difference. At the moment, what I see, again, I don't see it just in water polo, just in junior sport in general, that there's a lot of people trying to do really good things, but they're just taking it on themselves and they're really trying to set up great programs, but there's not as much interaction or working together as probably needed.
I mean, you're so right. It is a big ecosystem that our kids are involved in, and it's not just necessarily one sport, it's many sports. And I guess as well in that sort of ecosystem, we also have family time and we have homework and we have, music and drama and all that sort of thing. What crosses your mind when you hear about kids who are playing, multiple games on a Saturday and racing across town to make these games and then replicating that essentially again on a Sunday and maybe throwing in a training as well? What sort of comes to mind for you?
I see that a fair bit. I think for a little bit of time, especially early days, it's really exciting because you're getting to play so much sport and, play all of these games. But over time, what I've seen is just the wear and tear it has on the child and the family. You're playing one game. Before that game's over, you're rushing off to the next game. I think as a coach, I sit here and I look at what could we do to better set up an experience of that game. So how do we give them more time to warm up together, to have a team talk, to be part and present in that game? Because I think the sport is not just about the time in the pool. It's about, the time before the game, the time during the game, the time after the game where you can hang out, where you can talk about the game, debrief on the game. So I think some of those things get lost when they're just packing up. And I mean, I've seen it, and I've probably done it as well when I was playing, but I've seen it where you're finishing one game, and if you're winning or losing by enough and the result's kind of already taken care of, you grab your bag and you're off to your next game. Now, maybe in that moment that doesn't matter, but you're not really getting a chance to wrap that game up, to debrief it. And I think from a results perspective, they start to not matter because you've got 1,000 games, so you'll win some, you'll lose some. But also just from that whole experience of learning to be part of a team and learning what it takes to be an athlete or to be part of that team is all of the stuff, like the lead in, the during, the after, the hanging out and I know there's a lot of people who volunteer so much time, but being part of the club days or the school days or whatever that is. So I just think some of that other stuff gets lost, not just the in-pool water polo.
Bec, what was your experience of water polo like growing up as a kid? When did you start even playing?
I didn't actually start till I went to high school. So I was 14 by the time or 13 and a bit by the time I started. And to be honest, I had not that much of a clue about it. My brothers started at school. I came from more of a swimming background, but my parents were just throw us in anything and keep yourself busy. So you're not playing on the streets in the afternoon. So we were kept pretty busy, but we did a bit of everything. And swimming was the one thing where there's 4 kids, the 4 of us could all go and train, and they'd drop us off.
It's very efficient.
It's very efficient. And I think cost effective too. It was like pay a family fee, there's so much that was, I suppose, easy about it, but also being in Australia, a really important part. So we started there. And then when I went to high school, I actually started. When I was younger, it was probably less complicated. There was an under-16s team, there was an under-20s team, and there was grade water polo. Now we're seeing the growth of age group sport, which is not a bad thing, but there's 12s, there's 14s, there's 16s, there's 18s. I think in some states there's the odd years as well, 13s, 15s. So there's a lot more that can kind of drag you away. My challenge was probably more between my multiple sports, but my dad was always, and my mum, but they were always like, whatever you commit to, you've got to finish out. You can't, drop one and pick up something else. So I think my experience is probably similar in some ways, but different as well, because we just weren't pulled in so many directions by the same sport.
And what did you learn from that experience of being in the water, not just with your age group, but with older girls as well?
We played our age group, but then we also played in, I think my starting point was come and play 5th grade. And I was surrounded by all these senior athletes who were either they were happy playing there, or they were on their way down, from being at the top on their way down. And they helped you understand the game a lot better, because as a young kind of upcoming player, you think you know everything and you're a bit faster and fitter and learning things really quickly, but their brains are so much more set for the game, and their knowledge of the game was probably what got me. And I'd get so frustrated when we were playing, and these people we were swimming rings around would just school you with some really tricky skill or just like a good game reading situation, and you'd get really frustrated, but you started to learn. And in some of those lower grades in particular, sometimes they'd grab you and talk to you and kind of say, hey, try this, try that. And I think at the time as a kid, you probably don't quite appreciate it. But over time, you start to realize how much of an impact that has. Sometimes they're the ones to take the moments, like to hold the ball and tell people what to do, direct traffic a little bit. And I think that that's probably what lacks in only age group, because you don't have that level of knowledge there. So that's the kind of benefit in playing in some of those senior programs. And then also if you're the young one, there's less expectation, less pressure. So in some ways you get to play a bit freer, and then that starts to change as you go through. But yeah, a lot of benefits to it as well.
Do you have that in the setup that you have for the Aussie Stingers? Do you have a sort of more experienced old guard who's more established in their water polo career, who are helping bring through the younger generation of players?
Yeah, it's interesting in a senior team of the level of experience that you want or need in a team, and where you can afford to bring in younger players, where you've got levels of experience. For Paris, we had some athletes going for their third Olympics. So there's a lot of experience in there, then others who are going for their second major international competition. So it was a real balance. And some of those players are there to read the game and lead the game, and others are there to kind of do all the small things that actually have major impact because they've just got so much knowledge and experience and can read the game so well, and to lead the others. So now we're kind of going through this bit of a transition where we've lost some of those senior players and we've got still a good solid group and some real experience there. But how do they then start to lead the younger ones coming through, or the less experienced, and start to teach them how to take some of those roles and responsibilities as well? So it's a really interesting place, because when you step into that, it can sometimes take away from your normal performance because it adds a layer of responsibility. But I think it also adds to their learning. One thing I think about someone who's trying to go to their third or fourth Olympics, and there's a point where maybe you're the complete player in terms of your skills, your fitness. You can always make small improvements, but how much more can you add to your game if you're growing in your leadership or your decision making and things like that? So I think it adds an element to them as well to continue to grow.
We were here to talk about kids sport, but I think while we've got you and we're talking about Paris, it's well worth exploring. What was that experience like? Because that was easily one of the best, I guess, story arcs and sport arcs to watch during the games, was what was happening with the women's water polo and the passion they had at the pull and pull side and the way that team came together. What was that experience like?
I think reflecting on it after, because in the moment I really tried to block out everything and I switched off all my social media. I tried to be like one of the athletes and just be there and, and process and just kind of sit in it and enjoy it. And I really did. I had the best time. And then afterwards, looking back and hearing all the feedback and seeing what was being talked about, I think that just gave me a huge sense of pride, because what I felt there was what was being seen. We have a great team. We've got all these really, unique personalities who come together with a joint goal. And that's probably like one of my favorite things, is how do you bring a group of people who are all, I know everyone just thinks everyone wants to win, but one thing I've realized is everyone's why is really different. So why I want to be there, why every player wants to be there, what drives them is really different. So how do we bring this group of people together that are really different, really unique, embrace all of that, yet try and achieve something together? That was a really cool process. So we spent a lot of time on who we are as a team and who we are as individuals within the team. And we let that lead, like who we wanted to be. And then I don't know, as we did that, you saw their performances through training, through the build up into Paris really start to grow, because they just started to believe in themselves that little bit more. They started to back themselves as players, back themselves as a team, and just feel, really united in something. And I know that's what every team aims for, but we could see it, we could feel it every single day. And I know some of the coaches, we sat there and we were like, we could do something really special here. And we were really quietly confident, but to actually do it was pretty cool.
That's amazing. I mean, you're so right. And to have gone back to that why and purpose and to have built the team, what an incredible feeling. I know that you have nieces who play water polo and you often will sit in the grandstands watching them. And I think that's brilliant, because you're hanging out with your family and you're also watching them play sport, and like many boxes are ticked all at once, and we can all appreciate how good that is on a busy weekend. But what do you sit and hear? You're the coach of the Australian women's team and you're sitting in the stands. What are you hearing parents say, and what does it make you feel?
Oh, I've sat in the grandstand a lot, even before I was the national coach, and I've been coaching for a little while now. So I've heard some of the most outrageous things from different people that you wouldn't expect. I know when I go and watch my nieces, I try and go a little bit and just sit with my family, because it really is. It's about watching them and just trying to hang out at the same time. But I think just some of the stuff I hear is people's thoughts out loud, things that perhaps would be better just not said publicly. And I know that most people, again, they're with the right intentions, but these kids are kids. And I think coaches are doing their best, the players are doing their best, the refs are doing their best. And yeah, just to sit and enjoy, I think would be, that's the part I want to do, is just sit and enjoy. And I know I've said something once or twice to a group of parents that were just happened to be at a game that I was at, where it was just a reminder that a kid made a mistake and that, it is just kids sport. And they weren't being mean. It was just the energy and the volume at which they were panicking. And I just thought, you're projecting that on those athletes or on those kids. So some of it's not like deliberately malicious. I think a lot of it is just nerves and excitement also from parents, but I can feel that. And when I feel it, I think, well, what's a child feeling? So yeah, it's a hard one. Like you care and you want parents to be loud and energetic and, really cheer for their teams and for the opposition, but it can go too far. I've sat there and heard parents of senior athletes, put down other athletes loudly, publicly. And I'm just thinking, how is this coming out of your mouth? They're not private conversations where you're having a real in-depth conversation about a performance. It's just thoughts coming out loud. And I just think we probably just need to be more aware of the environment that we're in.
I think that's a really good point, and I love it as well. I always think about what the impact is on the athlete or the child, and more specifically when they're hearing all that feedback and how that impacts how they play the game.
Yeah, one of my things as a coach is I definitely talk on the side of the pool and I'm coaching, but I've got this real awareness that they can't hear everything and that those players need to actually learn to make the big decisions in the game themselves, because as coaches we get frustrated when they don't make the decisions, yet we sometimes overcoach. So if they're getting feedback from their coaches and they're hearing it from the crowd and they're hearing it specifically from certain parents, it starts to get a lot. And you notice it a lot in children's sport where they are constantly looking over their shoulder for feedback or for direction. And I think what would happen if we just let them be? Like, what would happen? Maybe they get it wrong sometimes, or maybe one instruction from a coach or from teammates in the water. But if they get it wrong, it doesn't matter because that's part of learning. But if we never allow them to get it wrong, they're probably never going to learn it anyway. They'll be forever looking over their shoulder, even as they get older. A part of my goal is to create independent thinking athletes with, obviously you've got to have direction and you've got to kind of learn all of those things. But how do they ever put that into practice if we don't really give them that chance?
Bec, you are an absolute powerhouse in this water polo space. We are so grateful that you would come on and talk to us about kids water polo and give that really clear direction as to what we need to see more of at the junior level. I think it's really important that these conversations are being aired and shared, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
As you can see, thank goodness we have such wonderful wisdom leading water polo in Australia and sort of setting the tone at that national level for what we're looking for as a team. I thought it was really interesting how Bec talks about the need to look at our kids and actually refer to them as kids, not athletes, but look at the kids in terms of what their overall programming is and how much water polo they're playing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's exactly right. And, talking about feeding off that energy from the stands and the parents and making sure that is a positive experience. And I mean, it just talks to so much of what we think about kids sport, right? It needs to be fun. It needs to be focused on the long term and not just prioritizing playing more at the youngest of ages to ensure that, we think that it's probably going to get the best outcome for them as performers, I guess, but also it's not that. It actually ends up burning them out. So how do we create that program where they get that game experience, they get those skill sets without burning them out?
It actually reminded me a bit of that concept that Michael Bowl talks about, the swimming coach, about how much performance can you get out of the child with the least amount of practice.
Yes.
How do we find that point?
Yes, exactly. If we can keep that front of mind, I think as parents, communicate with your kids' coaches about that and say that is your intention. Be really intentional about it. And when that, that performance sort of stalls or, doesn't progress anymore and your child would like to continue to progress and improve, your child is driving that, then that's when you start to look at what to do next.
I think it was also really interesting that Bec didn't start playing water polo until she was 14. So parents, do not panic. You don't need to be in this and you don't need to be in this with any level of intensity by a certain age. There is not a use by date on when you can join these sports. I think particularly that's really important.
And there's no use by date on just having fun in sport.
Oh, so Libby, that's it. I mean, wow, what a slogan.
Yeah, I reckon that should be our slogan.
Use by date? Never.
Never. Georgie, that was an amazing conversation. Well done. And thank you again to Bec for her time.
Share it with your water polo friends. Share it with your non-water polo friends. There's a lot in there that relates to all sports. And Bec was really keen to point out that some of these things are not just things we're seeing in water polo. We're seeing them everywhere. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sportish. We will be back in your ears next Wednesday as always. And in the meantime, if you would like to see what else is happening in the world of sport, have some really interesting sports conversations, have some topics to raise at your dinner table, follow along with us at Being Sportish on Instagram. We're pretty active there over the weekends.
Yes, mostly weekends.
Mostly weekends, because that's when most of the sport happens. And if you see any great stories that you think we should be talking about, feel free to flick it through to us either on DMs or on our emails.
Yes, and if you have any questions or any concerns that you're having at your school or club, let us know. We talk to the best.
We go straight to the top.
We don't know much, but we know the people to talk to.
We don't know much, but we know how to find the people who know much.
Correct.
We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.